Hello and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm your host, Marcus Grodi, and this is a special episode from our recent trip to Scandinavia. This time we traveled to Oslo, Norway, where we met former Lutherans Bishop Bernt Eidsvig, Bishop of Oslo, and Kristine Dingstad, Information Officer for the Diocese. Now sit back and enjoy this first interview with Bishop Eidsvig. We're at Lunden Convent here outside of Oslo. This is a convent dedicated to Our Lady of the Annunciation. And we're here in this particular episode, a very special guest, Bishop Bernt Eidsvig, who's the Bishop of Oslo. Bishop Eidsvig, welcome to The Journey Home.
Thank you.
It's great to meet you and to have you here. It's a great privilege, also a great privilege for us to be here in Oslo. And thank you for the invitation that we've received to do these programs here. It's been a great pleasure to interview other converts to the church, so it's great to talk with you. The normal process on the Journey Home program is I invite the guest to take us a step back and let us understand your early spiritual journey, your formation before you thought about becoming Catholic. So if you would, Bishop, kind of start us back with your journey.
Well, I was baptized into the established church, which is Lutheran, and grew up in it, and nothing remarkable about it, I think. Only I never thought of myself as Lutheran. But I was a Boy Scout in the Lutheran parish. I took part in the youth work, and I started theology as a Lutheran, and I finished school. I was 18 at the time. I tried to identify with the Lutheran doctrine and the Lutheran liturgy, and I wasn't comfortable about either. I had some access to the Catholic tradition from England, the High Church, but of course that was a national thing, and I knew it wouldn't function in Norway. You couldn't copy that.
Did you study in England as a young man?
Afterwards. Later.
Afterwards, okay.
Later. But I visited often. But that didn't apply to Norway. So I tried to make sense as a Lutheran and to see myself in the Lutheran ministry. But in the end, I decided that would never function. So I went to the Dominicans and asked for somebody to prepare me for conversion. And one of their fathers did.
Was it here associated with this convent here? Were their brothers associated with these sisters?
No, there's a convent of Dominican friars in Oslo. They have their own church. And
all right.
I think there were about 10 at the time, so it's for Norway, a big community.
Now, during that period, there's obviously some differences between your Lutheran training as a young man and then the Catholic Church as you went through those times of training under the Dominicans. Did you have any particular troubles with the differences in theology or doctrine?
No. I had more difficulties with the Lutherans. So it was the Catholic point of view was not unknown to me, and I sympathized with it. Well, of course, as most people of Lutheran background, understanding Our Lady and approaching her as Catholic should took me some time, but I think I've caught up with it.
You certainly, one thing I noticed earlier is that your English accent sounds British, so you did spend some time in England.
Yes, I spent quite a bit of time in England, but it's 3.5 years, I think, in doing my second degree.
Ah, okay, after becoming Catholic.
After becoming Catholic.
So what, it was about a year in your training, in your journey into the church, under the Dominicans?
Yes, they instructed me for a year.
Okay.
And then they said, well, now you have to make a decision. And I made a decision and was received into the church on the 21st of December 1977.
How did your family feel about your journey from Lutheranism, state church, into the Catholic Church?
They were not enthusiastic, but again, they are not anti-Catholic, and they're not terribly Lutheran either. So what my father grew up with was, I think, little Anglican influence. And my mother, as far as Lutheranism goes, was on the more liturgical side of the church.
Were you hearing the call to the priesthood at the same time?
Well, I think I felt called to some sort of ministry from the age of 10, 11. And I tried to make sense of that. That's why I started at university in Oslo. And I'm still trying to make sense of it, but now I may not interpret it any longer because it's done for me.
But I'm wondering, did you ever discern that you'd be in the position of bishop? I mean, I've tried to imagine that myself, my own call to ministry, but bishop seems like such a high calling.
Yes, it's a calling, I think, that every sensible Catholic tries to avoid. And so the decision has to be made for him by others. And as most bishops, I felt very uncomfortable with the thought of being a bishop. And I asked Cardinal Ray whether he was aware that I belonged to a monastery, and I wanted to stay in the monastery because that's what God called me to. And he said, well, it's the Holy Father's privilege to interpret your vocation.
Also, to make sure I get this, my own. So you became a Dominican in your entrance?
No, I was an Augustinian canon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, how did the Dominicans get you to become Augustinian?
No, it's more complicated than that. I went to my predecessor's predecessor, who just died, who was a Cistercian of the strict observance, and told him I wanted to be a priest, but I wanted to join the Augustinian canons, and he said, there are no Augustinian canons here, and we need you here. And if you, after a few years, still feel the vocation, I think you should go to them. But since you don't know them, and I don't know them, you may as well be a diocesan priest. And I accepted this. So I was a diocesan priest for 9 years, but in between I got to know the Augustinian canons in Austria, and made retreats there, and felt very much at home. And after 9 years, my immediate predecessor allowed me to try my vocation. So I was a secular priest first.
All right. Mm-hmm. Where'd you serve here in Norway?
In Bergen.
In Bergen?
All those years, yes.
All right. And then in your calling to become a bishop, talk to us a bit about that surprise.
No, I heard certain rumors, and I went to New Ulm in Minnesota for the ordination of a friend, and made a little holiday, Long Island afterwards, and then there were telephone calls first from my abbot, who said that the nuncio had been there to talk about me. And I said, what did he say? And he said, I'm not allowed to say that. But you will hear from somebody, which happened the day after, and I was called to Rome.
I was thinking that day and a half, you're wondering, is it going to be good news or bad news? I'm wondering.
Well, it was rather terrifying. They don't call you to Rome unless you are in trouble or due for promotion. And yes.
Bishop, before I ask you some questions about what you see are the biggest needs in Norway, it might be good to let the audience understand a little bit of the history of the church here in Norway.
Well, the church went under, you could say, with the Reformation in 1537, and all the monasteries were dissolved, and the last archbishop fled to the Netherlands, where he died the year after. The Reformation took some time, because there were only 2 Protestant families in Norway at the time it happened. And so there was no popular demand for it. Okay, yeah. 2 families. And this was a demand from the Danish nobility, not the Norwegian nobility. And well, the king we were in personal union with Denmark at the time, I have to add. So there was a big sweep, and he confiscated the church's fortune, and the bishops had to choose whether they wanted to be loyal to the crown or be arrested. 1 fled, and 2 were arrested, and 1 followed. And there was 1 vacancy at the time. But they had time, of course, so the Reformation made its way. Latin was used in the liturgy in certain places for 150 years after the Reformation, because they didn't want to provoke the peasants who had no understanding for the Reformation. A change of heart, I think, in a Protestant direction happened with the Pietist influence in the 18th and 19th century, which is still remarkably strong. The Catholic families that stayed loyal to the faith had to make their annual confession and communion in Holland or Germany or in England if they could manage to travel.
So it's like a recusant experience.
Yes, for a bit. And the Jesuit, there was a Norwegian Jesuit who tried to reconvert the country, or who was a remarkable character. More important in Sweden than here. He had some progress, but was found out because the population was very small, and any foreigner or stranger would be remarkable. So it was easy to detect. And there were at times smaller groups of Catholics, and some of the officers who were foreign were allowed to stay Catholics, and some cities later got the privilege to have a certain freedom of religion. It didn't measure up to much. In 1842, the French Council General in Oslo wanted to have his daughter baptized. There was a Catholic priest, the confessor of the Queen of Sweden, who was a Catholic, and he sent the priest over to do it. And then they signed the petition to the king and asked for the privilege of having a priest with them and building a chapel. The king allowed this. And in 1843 we had our first Catholic parish, but all those Catholics were foreign. German, most of them, a few French and a few Irish or English.
But no remaining that you know of Norwegian Catholic?
That had all died out. There was a Norwegian Catholic priest in Italy who joined the Barnabites. He was a merchant and had got to know the church there. And there was another one a little later who had a similar story. But that was it.
That's amazing.
And so they started from scrap, and they had the first converts 3 or 4 years later. The first priest was a Frenchman called Lichtley, who was a very good man, and he made several important friends and was a popular man in Oslo. Then we had this very interesting phenomenon from the Propaganda Fide. They looked at the globe and found out that some people had to live in the Arctic areas, and the church didn't know them or couldn't reach out to them. So they started something called the North Pole Mission. And they found a village in the northernmost county in Norway and said, well, this is going to be the center. So there was an eccentric Russian nobleman who had become a Catholic, was made the prefect of this mission, and was asked to reside in the north of Norway. He was, for our conditions, quite an exotic phenomenon, but it was in his way quite a wise man, and had a few converts here in Iceland. Shetland also belonged to the North Pole Mission, and Caithness in Scotland. So he built a few churches, and some of them still exist. But of course the communication within this vast area were hardly were at hand, so nothing much came out of it.
Probably the average Norwegian didn't even know it was happening up there. In
Oh yes, there was quite a lot in the press.
Oh, there was. Okay, yeah.
And they hinted that he was a Jesuit, and the Jesuits were not allowed to reside in the country till 1956. That was in the constitution. And he denied that he was a Jesuit. I later found out that he actually had been a Jesuit, but because of this mission he had been allowed to retire from the society.
So this is way north, right?
And this is as far north as you can get. And Greenland, Alaska, Newfoundland, Labrador, Siberia, it all belonged to this North Pole mission.
That's a story in itself. I've never even heard of that.
It's an interesting story. It didn't last for much more than 20 years and ended in disillusionment. But there are some parishes still exist out of this. Among them, the cathedral parish in the north of Norway.
So the church, though, grows in Oslo slowly in southern Norway?
No, it grows too much, which is an interesting worry to have, because we have a high Polish immigration. Nowadays, you mean? Mm-hmm. Yes. We have about 120,000 Poles at any given time working in the south of Norway. Agriculture, building, crafts, that sort of thing, because we are short of work. And they fill up our churches, which is very nice. And we've got 14 Polish priests who try to look after them. But at the moment, the capacity of our churches, especially in the cities, is too small. Trying to buy a church in the centre of Norway to accommodate the Poles, but we haven't yet found one which is suitable. We shall continue to look for one. So we have 54,000 registered Catholics. I think that's the latest number. But actually living here, there would be about 220,000. This growth has happened since 2004, when the EU allowed Poland and Lithuania and some other countries to join. And most of these new immigrants are Polish and Lithuanians.
Probably most of your clergy in Norway are converts or immigrants?
Of the Norwegian clergy, I think there is a majority of converts. They would be about 2/5. And the others are all nationalities. Quite a few Asian, 14 Poles, and they've grown up as Catholics, practically all of them.
For our audience, Bishop, what would you say are the biggest needs of the Norway Church as you're facing as a bishop?
This very easy need, I mean, the lack of space.
Yes.
Of churches, presbyteries, parish halls, offices. That's easy to figure out. The more difficult needs would be to look after all these immigrants, to find out where they live, what their needs are. We're trying, and with the Poles I think we're making progress and registering quite a few. The Lithuanians as a group is very difficult to get in touch with, and I think they're about 20,000. We haven't got a Lithuanian priest, and I intend to see the Archbishop of Vilnius before the summer and ask for his help. There is a Franciscan coming occasionally, but not often enough. This group worries me a lot.
What about the issue of catechesis here for the Catholics, children and
all parishes offer catechesis, and the bigger parishes will have Vietnamese catechesis, Polish, English, at least. And the schools, of course, the Catholic schools, which are only 4 in the entire country, offer catechesis. And they, of course, only reach a limited number of pupils.
I know one of the issues in America that we've encountered after the council was some issues where the council was misinterpreted and misapplied, and so there's a struggle of its effect on liturgy and the local parish. Was that a phenomenon also here in Norway at all?
I think that we were more moderate than what you refer to. It's hard to compare because I don't know the church in America well enough.
All right.
But I think on the whole, I think we were sensible applying the new liturgy and the other changes. There were, I'm sure, inconsiderate things done, but those were the exceptions.
Is there a rise in the calling to the religious life here?
Yes. We have, I think, 7 young men preparing for the priesthood in religious orders, which doesn't sound very impressive to you, of course, but it's out of our small numbers.
Oh, with your numbers here, yeah, that's fantastic.
It's not bad. We got 6 seminarians, and there are 5 new candidates now for the autumn who will start studying. So we are not doing badly. Of course, we can always improve. Every first Friday, apart from the Sacred Heart, we make special prayers for vocations to the priesthood and religious life. And it helps, as you see.
One of the things that I'm looking forward to seeing when I travel with my wife to Bergen at the end of the week is what's called a Stave Church. I'm not sure what that is. I've seen pictures of it, but could you tell the audience a little bit, because there's a number of those around the country, is that right? Remaining from the Middle Ages.
Yes. Stave Churches now, I think, only exist in Norway, but they were widespread. It was a method they knew on the continent as well. Wooden churches in timber, built without nails, and they are tall and dark and smell of tar. But it's I've had the privilege of saying Mass in the Stave Church on a few occasions, and for the liturgy it's wonderful, and it's a natural, functions as a natural loudspeaker as well. You can be heard everywhere, and you needn't use a strong voice at all.
Because I've seen pictures, I've read about it in Ingrid Undset's book of Kristine Dingstad's daughter. That's a very big part of that whole story. But it's amazing to see, in some places in the world when the Reformation happened, everything was destroyed in the process. It seems in Norway a lot of the old church was preserved, as you said, maybe because some of the families way out in the western part or northern part of Norway didn't even see the change right away in their lifetimes.
No, I think in the interior of the country that took about 250 years. But the Stave Churches are still used by the Lutheran Church in some places. What finished many of them was, of course, the growth in population in the 19th century, because they got too small. And they were not valued, and so they were...
Just let go. Now, there's also a very historic pilgrimage site in the north of Norway, isn't there? Trondheim.
Trondheim, yes. Before the Reformation, I think number 4 in Europe as to the number of pilgrims. Now, I think the consciousness of pilgrimages and the prayers of the saints is growing. Interesting thing, as we sit here, the bishops of the Church of Norway, the Lutheran Church, are making their pilgrimage on foot most of the way to Trondheim.
So it isn't just a Catholic shrine. I mean, they've recognized their own tradition.
I think the Lutherans are actually trying to build up something here, and they've got chaplains for the pilgrims who have no other work than taking care of the pilgrims. Of course, the tradition has died out, so they do a few things which we would find slightly puzzling, but their intentions are good.
Sounds a bit like Walsingham in England.
Yes. But of course the Lutherans haven't got saints, so but they exist, so I'm sure that the Lutherans will feel the benefit of their intercession.
All right, Bishop. As we close, I wonder if we could have your blessing for the audience.
Yes. May Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop, for your witness and for sharing your journey with us, as well as some needs for the church here in Norway. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us on this special edition of the Journey Home. We'll take a break and be back in a moment. Welcome back. Now on to our interview with convert Kristine Dingstad, born daughter to a Lutheran minister and now information officer for the Diocese of Oslo. Kristine, welcome to the Journey Home.
Thank you. It's a great honor.
Well, it's an honor for us to be here and to. I must admit, for many Americans, it's a great joy to hear about conversions here in Norway as well as in Sweden. We're visiting here, so thank you for coming on our program to give us a bit of your own journey. I know it's hard to condense a whole life into a half hour.
It is. We'll try.
Especially in a language that's not your first language. But thank you so much. I'd like to invite you to kind of journey back and give us a little glimpse of your spiritual upbringing, if you would.
Thank you. Well, I was born 35 years ago in Bergen, the west coast of Norway, and my father used to be a Lutheran minister.
Right.
So I was raised like, the daughter of a priest, and I had these beautiful parents and a really good Christian upbringing. We read the Bible every day, and we did our prayers, and also actually the hours. Yeah, we did. Well, especially in the evenings, the completorium, the night prayer of the church. So it's kind of like a strange Catholic upbringing, but it was not. Was it?
What's called a high church Lutheran?
I was. My father, he used to be this really conservative, high church priest. So that's my background, actually. I tried to be, a good Lutheran, and we went to church every Sunday, but something was missing, actually. My father, he was that kind of priest that wanted to, protest against the liberal thinking in the Church of Norway. So he was one of the high-profile priests, actually, in the Church of Norway, the Lutheran Church, that protested against, the gay movement and the gay priesthood. And
is that a problem here in Norway, Lutheranism?
It is, yeah, and the female priesthood.
Yes.
So he was struggling all his life, and in my upbringing, these were great themes, and the abortion debate. So that's my background, this kind of conservative high church thing. And
so even then, yourself, as a young Lutheran, conservative Lutheran, kind of a protesting Protestant, right? I mean, that was your family protesting against the direction of the Protestant church.
It was actually, yeah. And finally, my father, he took the consequences, and he left the Church of Norway. And he didn't become a Roman Catholic, but he became, it's kind of strange, but he's got a re-ordination from the Polish National Catholic Church, the American ones.
Catholic, but independent from Rome.
That's right, that's right. So I have this kind of Catholic upbringing, but something was missing, and I was always longing for something. And I tried, to go to these youth movements things and these charismatic things, and I was really, really seeking the Lord. But I didn't really find my way. I felt like a stranger all the time, actually. But I was trying and trying, you know.
But these were movements independent of the Lutheran Church. Right?
Well, some independent and some inside, you know, like Lutheran movements, you know. And I was trying, and I always sometimes went to this charismatic movement thing, you know, trying to find something. And I really tried, and I tried to be a charismatic Lutheran as well. But I mean, I really felt that like we were acting, because I didn't get my heart to join, you know. So I was seeking, you know, I needed a faith that was wider and deeper and higher. So I was seeking something, and then I suddenly understood that I actually had a Catholic faith. So
how did you discover that?
Well, how do you do that? Partly, it was because I was, you know, raised, you know, to be in theology, you know, to think theology. So it was, you know, the view of the the church, you know, the ecclesiology actually, and the theology of priesthood. So that was one way, you know, through the theology, you know, And the other way was, you know, the personal one, the longing for something else. And actually, mostly the longing for the mystic experience in life, you know, the mystics of God. Because I didn't find that way of spirituality where I'd been seeking. And then I actually met Catherine of Siena, not in a physical way, of course, but I was reading about her, and you know, her great combination of mystics and contemplative life, and her charity work. So she kind of helped me. You know, she took me by my hand and followed me to the Catholic Church. So that's what I feel, actually.
It's really, it was the discovery of the great mystic in Catherine.
But we were a lot of friends, actually, you know, in this high church movement in Norway. And my male friends from the same milieu, they had planned to become ministers in the Church of Norway. But then finally, actually, as a group, we converted. Finally, then 10 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, we did.
How many in that group, actually?
Well, I guess around 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind
I'd say
of
that's a rare thing, probably.
It is. And actually, when I converted, it was on the front page of the Christian newspaper here in Norway. Because, you know, as I told you, my father used to be a high-profile Lutheran priest. So it's kind of like, you know, a sensation or a scandal or something. Yeah.
But all of these young people together, that's an amazing thing. In the support that gave, where most of them, it was their journey to the Catholic Church like yours, in that it was almost an understandable trajectory of the way you were brought up in a high church Lutheran, very close to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So was that true for most of those in your group?
Well, yeah, I think most of them, actually. But some of them, they were like really, really Lutherans, because they studied theology here in Oslo. And but I think, you know, the Church of Norway has lost, you know, its fundament. And if you really, really want to be a traditional Christian, you have to seek somewhere else nowadays. But it was a really, really challenge especially for the theologians, of course, you know, to change the way of thinking. And I mean, also because they had to change, you know, the plans for the future, because they were planning to be ministers in the church, in the Church of Norway.
Change for them.
It is, yeah. So for me, it was kind of different. So, but when I finally converted 10 years ago, it was really like, you know, a journey home, and I felt at home at once, and I really felt like my faith was getting deeper and wider and higher and everything.
I mean, sometimes I'm a little awkward to ask, but your father, who himself had gone in conversion from Lutheranism to you know, a Catholic tradition that's separated from Rome and the Holy Father. Was he applauding you in your journey? Or was that a problem for him?
Well, it was not a problem for him, I think.
Okay.
It was a great disappointment for the milieu we kind of were raised in, of course, when all the young people left Rome, of course. And it was a bit, some bad feelings, of course, disappointment. But he was kind of applauding me, and my mother as well. So I'm so thankful for that. And after that, my brother followed me as well into the church. But I still have a sister that's Lutheran. So we're kind of an ecumenical family.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, in your studies were in psychology, is that right?
Was, yeah.
Was that before or after your conversion to the church?
Well, it was during my studies, yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe my studies as well in psychology was kind of, was seeking for the truth, the mystics of life.
Yeah.
But the studies, the university studies, they don't show it to you, do they? Because they're more into materialism and experimental psychology. But the church, even opens the psychology, the mystery of being a human being.
When you studied your psychology, did it draw you into any other aspects of unique ministries as psychological studies combined with your Catholic faith? Did that come into drawing into certain work with your psychological training?
Yeah, I did training in existential psychology, and it's kind of a psychology that really opens for the spiritual world, the spiritual human being. And I was especially interested in I've also worked with girls abused in a church context, like in the Catholic Church and the Lutheran churches. So I did 2 years of therapy with girls or grown-up ladies that was
that had abused.
Had been abused, in a Christian family or in of a minister or in a church setting. Yeah. So that's that was my kind of vocation into the psychology.
I see. And you can see in a way that the Lord was preparing you for that, not from personal experience of what you were counseling, but having been in a religious family, the daughter of a priest, trained in psychology with a spiritual awakening. It seems like you're in a perfect opportunity then to deal with, sadly, some young women.
I think you have to have a strong faith to deal with that, because when you convert, some converts are really get disappointed about the human side of the church, and that's why some converts leave the church. I think quite many because of the disappointment, because you kind of feel when you convert that it's going to fulfill all your dreams, like in a social aspect as well. But it doesn't work like that, because there's humans everywhere. And to work with the human side of the church, even the abuse problem, you have to have a really strong faith and faith in the church as a Christ's mystical body, not just the community of people.
In America, we have a phrase called PKs, pastors' kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
and they're
true.
Often the roughest kids. They're the ones that want. They're the ones that want to fight against the faith. They're the one. I was a pastor, so I had a couple PKs. They're all great kids, and my boys are great boys. And but sometimes PKs can be struggle themselves with the faith, because there's their father up on the pulpit every Sunday. So we see him on the pulpit, but then he's at home. Was there a bit of that own struggle for you as a quote PK?
To be honest, it wasn't actually, because I was always proud of my father. But I had a brother that was kind of a rebel, he did that. But I was not actually. So I think I'm just grateful and thankful for what he gave me.
Well, that's a real gift of God to have been receptive to that faith all along.
But I think it's a saying in Norway that it takes a lot of courage to kind of mean or to take the same opinions and the faith as your parents, because it kind of you need courage to do that. Because some people said to me that Kristine, you're just imitating your father, and your family. But I wasn't actually. I felt like I was taking it to and making it my own, in my own experiences. So.
Well, you didn't exactly follow your father.
Well, no, I didn't. No,
I mean, that's the point. It was your own. It was your own calling.
It was my own calling, really. Yeah, and especially when I decided, to convert to the church, that was my choice, and I'm so happy. For that, and I really enjoy to be a Catholic, especially in Norway. It's really interesting because now I work as the information officer in the Diocese of Oslo, and some people ask
me. What
me,
is that? Tell me what that.
Well, in the information office, working with the media and with the magazines, trying to communicate the Catholic faith to mainly Protestant world here in Norway. And some people ask me, why don't you, use your education, your psychology experience? But I am, because, communication is psychology, isn't it? A lot of it.
Understanding your audience.
It is. Yeah. You have to understand who you're talking to, and use your skills. And I think it's so interesting now because, the media and the whole of Norway are really interested in the Catholic Church, and the church is expanding, and that's kind of strange because elsewhere in Europe they have to close down parishes, but in Norway it's expanding, and everybody is interested. And whenever the media they need like a clear Christian voice, they now turn to the Catholic Church, and that's really interesting because
so you're finding yourself in a very important spot in the church as that, at least communicating what the bishop wants to say to the community. There
That's
you are,
true.
making sure it's...
Yeah, and we have all these great opportunities now because the people will listen to us. So I really enjoy my work as an information officer.
You came in with a group of young people. Talk a bit about the status of the young people in Norway. Where are they spiritually?
Well, in Norway or in the Catholic Church? You mean in general?
Well, I was thinking in general.
Yeah.
In Norway, where are they?
Well, Norway is a really secular country, indeed. And I think it's much like in the Americas, but it's probably even more secular, I think. So people don't learn their prayers anymore. They don't learn the Bible. So it's kind of, the faith is kind of a blind spot for them nowadays. So, but in my generation, I'm not a youth anymore. My friends, they, they went to the Sunday school and they learned the prayers because we learned about the Christian faith at school. But nowadays, they learn more about religion. So, but I think young people in Norway today, they're kind of seeking something, they're longing for something. And you can see that even though the Catholic kids, not all Catholics are active Catholics, but when they come for the, confirmation, they're kind of interested, more interested nowadays than 10 years ago, actually. So some great things has happened in Norway, and it gives us, as a church, enormous challenges, because I think people are ready for the Word of God, and to go back to their tradition, because people are longing for traditions and, a solid ground to stand on.
We can't go very far in Norway and encounter historical evidence of the church here in Norway. Everywhere. There's a Stave Church, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And maybe when you have it, you take it for granted, but then when you don't have it, you start to appreciate it.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, there is a lot of prejudice against Catholics in Norway, of course, because the Catholic faith was forbidden for like 300 years after the Reformation. So we've just been here for about 150 years now. So we have to kind of, challenge some prejudices. But I just had a talk with a new nuncio to the Scandinavian countries. I did an interview for a magazine, and he said a great thing, and I was so enthusiastic about that, because he said that he thought that Scandinavia could be kind of prophetic for the world, because the church here is expanding, and the church here is seeking back to the roots. And you see that when we still have new monasteries, they build new monasteries, and also close to the medieval ruins. So we're kind of connecting back to our roots and still expanding. So, and I think that as well, that we might come into that situation that we can become prophetic, this really, really secular country.
Yeah, I've heard a number of times that comment that there's many who have great hope for Europe in the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a neat thing. Another thing that I heard, which was interesting, is that there's a great commitment here in Norway to the internet, for example. And I mean, there's good in the internet as well as bad, but yet it's a great medium for communicating the faith.
It is, yeah. And I'm the editor of the Catholic sites here in Norway, and it's a huge site actually, and it's so much activity there, really.
Yeah.
So and we're really putting money into it, and we do priorities on the internet, because especially young people, students, they are looking for information on the internet. So that's a really important ministry, actually, to work with the internet. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great gift of God.
It is.
The devil wants to use it too, but we but we need to make sure that we use it for the right purposes.
That's true.
Another problem in Catholicism at different places around the world is the issue of catechesis. How is that in Norway as a goal?
Well, we kind of give it priority, actually. And in my parish, the cathedral parish, St. Olaf, we have catechesis for all the years, from second grade until when you do confirmation. And I'm a catechist teacher myself for the second grade, and it's really, really important. But of course, not everybody comes to the catechesis, but we kind of give it as an opportunity. But it's kind of sad to see that even Catholic children, they don't know their prayers, they don't know their Bible stories. And we have this program, this great program for the catechesis, for the grade by grade. But now I have stopped using it, because the children that comes, they don't have any background.
So you have to step back farther?
I have to stay back, just to talk about Jesus. Because I remember I was a teacher for the confirmation, the class once. And then after 1 year, I asked them before the confirmation, do you have any questions? Do you think something else we should have talked about that we didn't talk about? And then this young girl, she, raised her hand and said, well, we kind of don't know anything about Jesus. And that's kind of a challenge, because we can't take it for granted that they have this, background from their homes anymore. They don't know their Bible stories. They don't know Jesus.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, that little girl's question almost sounds like a prophetic admittance of Norway. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, that's true. That's really
People
true.
are they Lutherans because that's their state church, but maybe they don't know a lot about Jesus.
Oh, they don't, no. And that's why I think we have to, change our attitude. Because when we used to we are a minority church in Norway, and then, the teaching we did to the children was like, the special Catholic things, about the sacraments and the Pope,
Devotions
and, the special Catholic things. But I think our challenge is, to preach the traditional Christian message, both to our, children, the Catholic children, but also to the world, because it's missing all over, actually. So we should go back to our roots, to the gospel again. I mean, of course, we love the gospel, but we have to preach the gospel, really, and tell people about Jesus.
Well, and you were mentioning that even in your own early spiritual journey, you were involved with some of these youth movements. Many of the youth movements recognize that very thing, to rediscover Jesus Christ, to have a conversion to Jesus Christ. But the danger of many of those movements is they leave the church behind.
Oh, they do, yeah. And you're so kind of, you have to rely on your own kind of spiritual experiences. And sometimes God speaks to us in mysterious ways. It's not like great ecstatic feelings, is it? All the time. Right. Some people experience it. Some people don't actually. And one of the great things about being a Catholic is that I can kind of rely on the church. Because when I don't manage to do my prayers every day, when I have my struggles, then I can just rest, and I know that the church is praying me and it's carrying me. And that kind of, when you're having hard times, you can kind of breathe and rely on the church. And that's just amazing. And I really would like more people to experience that.
Well, this call to re-know Jesus is not a rejection of the church or any of the devotions or anything. It's a recognition that the center of the church in the devotions is Christ.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's good to hear that your bishop and your priests and your diocese and your work recognizes this calling as a need, not just for all of Norway, but particularly even for the Catholics themselves.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, we have to start with the children and the youths, because, the society has become so secular, and Norway is really secular, the politics and everything. And I mean, we could write, chronicles, and we could do protest marches, and we should, of course, to mark something, but you can't, change things in that way. You have to start with the children and the youths, the Catholic children and youth, to give them education, because, that's where the challenge is today, isn't it? To make them getting to know Jesus and to have a spirituality that comes from inside. Because when we are in this minority situation in Norway, it's always a danger that everybody is friends, everybody knows each other. So it can, it could be an interest organization, kind of, because we share the same interests. We are a minority. But where we should, spend most time and resources is to the children and youths, because if we manage that, we can kind of turn everything back, to the Christian roots.
And this isn't a message just for Norway; it's for all of us.
It is, yeah.
Kristine, thank you so much for sharing the journey with us, and we pray for your work that you do for the diocese. It also, all the audience has a better concept of how we can pray for Norway and the Catholics here in Norway. So God bless you. And thank you for joining us on this special edition of The Journey Home. God bless.